Bullshit.
Bullshit.
A raw and real podcast. That's for you, Dawn. Yeah! Where we tackle life's challenges with real stories, advice, and expert insights. Keeping it real. Always real, right, guys?
Adam keeps it raw and real.
All right. So we've got a great guest for you today. We always have great guests.
We do.
And with more to come. Put a pin in that. So today we're talking about closed-mindedness.
Define.
And give me a sound effect for that. So.
Oh, wow.
Closed-minded.
And yes, it's a thing, he said.
Oh, good. She's going to Bank B. There we go. Yes. So according to Merriam-Webster, the dictionary people,
Okay.
closed-minded, not willing to consider different sides or opinions, having or showing a closed mind.
Okay.
So today we're going to be talking about what happens and what you miss out on potentially from having a closed mind. And not only what you as a person miss out on, but the potential damage or hurt you can do to others from being closed-minded.
Oh, yeah.
Now, we're going to get a little bit into this area of neurodiversity, and just to sort of define that for people who aren't, I feel like it's a very
No. Define.
popular topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to define it.
Definitely we need some definition, some defining.
But neurodiversity, and this is a very good thing, it's definitely become more of kind of a trendy topic. I think more and more people are aware of this concept of neurodiversity. But let me explain. So neurodiversity includes things such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia. These are people, and I myself am a self-diagnosed ADHDer. These are people who, because their brains and nervous systems work differently, experience the world in a very different way. And so if you're not aware of this, if you're not aware of what somebody with, let's say, autism, for example, how they might behave differently from what they sometimes call like a neurotypical person or a neuronormie, you might jump to certain conclusions. Based upon,
a lot of people probably do.
Yeah. So let's talk amongst ourselves.
Let's
talk
do
amongst
one
thing that you did to me last. Who are you?
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, yeah. You know what else that one gets is the Ultra Combo. Finish him. So yeah, thank you. I am Coach Adam. My last.
It's laughable.
This is Dawn. Dawn, just back from Kenya, Dawn.
She's also Coach Dawn.
And
She doesn't go by Coach Dawn.
yeah,
Queen. I came back a queen.
came
All
back
right,
a queen.
now.
We'll talk about that later too. And the illustrious C.
Oh, what an introduction.
Yeah.
Love it.
Beautiful.
And thank you for reminding me.
Yes, that's darling. Yes, darling. So I have a question before you put this out there. So
Yeah.
you said you self-diagnose.
Yes.
Can you elaborate?
Elaborate for us on that.
Yeah. Well, so I am a coach,
Yeah.
as you know, and I've focused my coaching on ADHD coaching, and this was in part because the first person I ever got paid to coach is somebody who has ADHD. My wife, who's a clinical psychotherapist, when I told her this, she said, "Oh, here's this great book by this guy, Dr. Tom Brown, called Outside the Box, all about ADHD." To help me with my client I was coaching. We weren't coaching specifically on ADHD at that time. We transitioned into doing that. So anyway, I started reading this book and I was like, oh my God, that describes me, and that describes me. And it was like so much stuff where it was like, oh yeah, like people who respond to caffeine, like tend to over-caffeinate themselves. People who are like super duper prone to certain types of addiction, like nicotine over here. And so all these different things, people who get distracted in a particular way, people who tend to think divergently. So in other words, the first place my brain goes if I'm given a problem is like 10 different solutions, not convergent, neuroconvergent, like focusing on one thing at a time. It's just like, blah, 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 which can be great for creativity. And just to repeat that so it's clear, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, we were not clear.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, it can be great for creativity. On the other hand, it can be really hard. For example, if you're given something and somebody's like, here's something to do and I need it done in an hour. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Oh, this reminds me of that movie with James Earl Jones. And then you go off on, like, everything is like an association for another thing. And there's also this thing called time blindness, which people with ADHD often have, where you can just really not have any sort of built-in inherent sense of time. So you get pulled in this direction and you're like, oh my God, this thing, and I'm going to do a search on this. And the next thing you know, 4 hours have gone by. And it's like, wow, I was supposed to get that thing done, 3 hours ago.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It makes you think now I'm thinking about when I do stuff. How come? You never know. It was never put to my attention before.
Well, exactly. Well, so that brings us back to this closed-minded idea, right? Like the more open your mind is to different possibilities, different options.
Right.
So what does that open up?
Makes sense.
Thoughts?
So I'm curious if you're a type of person who just absolutely zones in on stuff.
Yeah.
Like goes down a rabbit hole type of thing. You think of a topic and then all of a sudden it's like a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And maybe that's wasting time in a different way. And I don't know if that equates to anything. I don't know are you a focused person or are you one of those unnecessary deep divers? Like, I don't know how much information is all completely relevant. Research is research, but same time you start hearing the same stories over and over again.
Yeah.
Well, and then also I think, and I hear this come up a lot, like because of changes in technology, it didn't used to be that we all had supercomputers in our pockets.
No.
So it's a very different thing when you do have access to all this information. Like
it is. I remember in high school I was supposed to type a paper. We didn't have typewriters. So I was like, well, how am I going to do that? Like we didn't have computers either. So it was like, you want to type paper? What? I'm like, we didn't have it available. We had nothing available to us in the 80s. Like,
not like now.
We had to just.
Well, there were typewriters, but maybe not at Walnut Hill.
No, there were.
So how did you get it typed?
Who knows? I don't know. I probably.
Hitchhiked to the library?
Fuck if I know. No, I certainly didn't do that.
What?
Mercy.
I could have gotten a ride from the the taxi service that we had, but I didn't even know if there was a library in Natick. Was there?
There was.
I never went to
the
it.
library?
No,
We had a library at Walnut Hill.
we did.
Oh.
So I just stuck with that. It was limited, but
Okay.
it worked for the time.
Oh.
It's amazing anybody graduated.
These co-host people. Learning
But bringing us back to
Yeah.
closed-minded. So, like, what are some examples of areas where you've seen some damage that can be done from?
You're putting me on the spot.
Oh,
That's what I do.
well, I do have
Take a shot.
I do have an anecdote here from
Okay.
Medical News Today.
Oh,
ADHD in the workplace. To disclose or not to disclose?
that's a biggie.
Is it better to get support but risk the stigma? And I think there really is still a stigma out there about it, and people don't want
Most
to
definitely.
or deal with the struggle daily and fatigue of masking your.
Yeah.
That's got to be exhausting
Of course it is.
all day long, trying to not seem like you have this issue, but you do.
Exhausting.
Confidentiality. If you go to your, I don't know, your HR person, whatever. Again, I understand that because sometimes it's not confidential. Your business is sometimes always out in the street,
Right.
which it shouldn't be.
No,
But you're not comfortable. Some people don't even like to be comfortable telling they have a disability.
right? No, they don't.
So then you're gonna say something like that? Yeah, I have to tend to.
I feel like you're not gonna get that job, or you're like when they ask you, do you have a disability? And you're like, but there's such a long list. Who knows what you are on that list? Could be
Right.
something really small, but then I feel like, no, doesn't work.
Wow.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up too, because it's a perfect segue to our wonderful guest that we have today.
Okay.
Her name is Brooke Larimer.
Brooke.
Hello, Brooke.
She's a friend of mine.
Okay.
And we are going to bring her in. I hear the audio just
Yeah.
changed, but I want to just want to give her the proper introduction. She's
Okay.
an opera singer, a private foundation wrangler, a podcast co-host. What? We love podcast co-hosts. And a certified ADHD coach. And I have to say, so Brooke and I have reciprocoched each other. That means, you coach swap. And she is a very gifted coach. I just have to say that. I'm not to embarrass you, Brooke, but you are. Like most ADHDers, she wears multiple hats and shows up in different capacities in different contexts. Diagnosed as an adult nearly 20 years ago, her journey of self-discovery has been long and meandering, and she continues to unpack her cultural conditioning, ableism, and personal core beliefs. With a philosophy of liberation at the core of her coaching practice, she loves helping her clients find their authentic selves in a neuronormative world. That's a really good blurb about you, Brooke. So come on in, Brooke. Hello, welcome.
Brooke.
Hey, friends.
Hello, Brooke.
Hello, Brooke.
Hi.
Whoa. Okay.
Brooke's an opera singer.
So I really like that.
Are you going to do a
was
little opera for us
beautiful.
today, Brooke?
My goodness.
I hadn't warmed up, but I guess I
man.
could.
Yeah. Well, so Brooke, I'm sure you heard us kind of like tee it up, but through this lens of closed-mindedness, how would you like to talk a little bit about your experience?
Well, closed-mindedness is a huge topic. I think it's really related a lot to, all sorts of systems, oppressive systems that are built into our culture. And I have to get used to the sound effects.
Yeah. And Adam is a button pusher.
For sure.
So
I'm such a button pusher.
I feel like my closed-mindedness has impacted me the most in my own relationship with myself. It took me a really, really long time to accept the ways in which I just am different. And so I spent a good part of my life really trying to fit in and feel like I belonged in spaces where I felt like an alien. So, the first sort of level of closed-mindedness that I had to work through was my own, about expecting myself to show up in this normative way, in a world that is really invested in us being normative and just showing up for our work or our lives in a way that doesn't challenge any sort of systems or authority or anything like that. And so that was the first journey for me.
Wow, that's interesting, and I think a little bit maybe counterintuitive, but I'm glad you brought that up because I think, automatically when we think about closed-minded, the dynamic of like at least two people or a person and a system, be it society or,
Right.
sort of the corporate world. But that's really interesting, that the first place you went to was your relationship with yourself.
Right.
It's like you're about to say something.
No, but I agree. I don't think many people get there that quickly. I mean, usually it's other people pointing it out for you before you go, directly to your own. Wow.
Can I ask what made you, because this is all new to me, so I'm asking a lot of questions.
Please.
What was it that had you thinking that you would closed-mindedness for yourself? How did you, can you explain that a little more?
Yeah, I think I was always pretty good at school and I was pretty ambitious and saw a certain way of being successful and showing up in the world that I aspired to. And, ADHDers have incredible imaginations and we can project these really vivid ideas of who we are and who we will be and what life will be like. And I could never, ever live up to my own expectations because my imagination was it did not take into account any kind of limitations, be they just normal human limitations or the limitations of being a neurodivergent person. So it took a really long time to accept that I had limitations purely because I'm a human, because every human has limitations, right?
Absolutely.
We need to sleep, we need to eat, like we need, relationships and people in our lives, and we're not, sort of Stepford automatons who can just churn out work and creativity or whatever it is I was aspiring to. So there was a real like letting go of these imagined expectations that had to come first. Now, this is not to say that this came easily. It was decades of therapy and self-reflection and experimentation and some things I was able to sort of unpack some of this stuff when I sort of fell into roles and jobs and relationships that were either really great for me or really wrong for me. And those situations are incredibly instructive. And so you sort of just, I mean, I can't say that like I went into my life being like, I'm going to figure myself out. No, I figured myself out because I just kept stumbling around and then decided to learn from the context clues around me.
That deserves a round of applause. The context clues around
Well, thank you. I'll take a bow.
And, so Brooke, obviously, I'm a coach. Dawn is a coach from the intro. What got you into coaching?
Well, so I had a very carefully constructed life before the pandemic that sort of fed my ADHD needs for constant stimulation and external structure. And whether it was conscious or unconsciously built, I mostly unconsciously built, but it suited me. And I was able to do my life in this sort of chaotic, frenetic way with intermittent crashes. But I did it, like I had a life that fulfilled me and kept me moving forward. And then the pandemic happened and I had no idea
Ultra combo.
That's what the pandemic was, the ultra combo.
I had no idea how to function in this world where I lived alone. I live alone. So I didn't have any sort of human contact on a day-to-day basis. My job, my regular day job was still happening. I was still employed, but our life prior to the pandemic had been very in-person, very analog, and so we had to sort of reinvent the wheel. And for the first few months I did great, and then it all just screeched to a halt. And then I was like, I don't know how to be. I don't know how to function. I don't know what's going on. And I went on this real deep dive of self-reflection and, hired a new therapist and did this whole thing where I just was like, I need to understand what's happening. Because my experience, I knew I had ADHD, but what I was experiencing didn't feel like ADHD. I didn't understand it to be ADHD. But at the end of that, or sort of in the middle of that journey, I decided, well, maybe I should hire an ADHD coach. And then I was like, maybe I should train as an ADHD coach. Like I can really learn what this is. And so I signed up for a year-long program with the iAct Center, thinking like, if nothing else, I'll be able to manage myself better. And so I went on this journey. It was incredible. I learned a lot about coaching, which just coaching as a practice in general is incredibly impactful. And I found it really useful in my personal relationships and my professional life outside of coaching. So that's how I got there. It was sort of like, I don't know what to do. Flailing around, grabbing at straws. Yeah.
Well, and a big part of coaching, I think one could argue even sort of the central core tenet of coaching is expanding, sort of holding space for somebody we're working with to help them expand their mind and their conception of themselves and the rest of the world.
Yep. So I just want to throw this in there because my brain went blank. ADHD. What does it stand for again? For those that are listening that may not,
Oh, yeah, that's good. Brooke, I'll let you field this one.
Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's interesting because what a misnomer it is.
I mean,
Exactly.
it is and it isn't, right? Like it sort of captures it and it sort of doesn't. And I think, people have different relationships with the term. It's been the one that I've known for my whole life, so I don't take issue with it. But it is an issue of attention and it is an issue of activation and energy. And it's so much more than that.
What is the difference between ADD and ADHD?
There isn't one. They used to call it ADD and the ADHD was like a differentiation, but now they're all the same thing. So if you get diagnosed with ADHD, that covers all of them. They're different presentations. There's the inattentive style, there's the hyperactive style, and there's combined type. So
interesting. Oh,
yeah.
But you know what? One more. Told you I was going to roll.
Ready.
Like when you're in school, I remember when I was younger, I'm older than them. I keep telling them that. And they would say, oh, that kid has ADHD. And I said to my mom, well, what the hell does that mean? How do they know that?
Right.
You know, how long has this been out? Because I think I'm gonna go back a while, and they would say, "Oh, that kid has ADHD," and it was like, it was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it was assumed back then, which I didn't like because I don't like kids to be labeled.
Right.
You know, I hate that. You know, and how did this come about? Was something that, because it seemed like it just came about within the last couple of years, or maybe I'm wrong.
It goes back to the 1700s,
Okay.
believe it or not,
Okay.
in terms of
Okay.
when we have
Actually,
so this is
It
what
goes
something I
back
didn't
further
know.
than that, Adam.
thousands of years, really.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Hippocrates actually identified people with ADHD traits.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's been
I
a
set Brooke
part.
up for that one.
Okay.
You're welcome.
It's I see it as an evolutionary adaptation of sorts. Like it's a difference that serves humanity, even if it doesn't serve the individuals with it in our current context. It's good for the evolution of humans to have these different neurotypes because that, you know, we each have different skill sets, different perspectives in a different context, in a different cultural context. ADHD can be incredibly useful and powerful, and you know, it just, context is everything for ADHD, and really it is for anybody with any kind of neurodivergence. So
Yeah. It's great if you're a hunter.
Yeah.
It really is. There's actually a book. Brooke, have you read the book about ADHD?
Yeah,
it's called like a hunter and a...
Yeah, Tom Hartman's model of, like, you know, the neurotypical or the neuronormative behavior is to be a farmer, but ADHDers are hunters. And so the skills you use to hunt is very like in the moment, you know, reacting to the moment, whereas farmers are planners and plotters and methodical and routine. And yeah, it's an interesting model.
It is interesting. Well, and so something, I'm sure you're familiar with this one, Brooke. We've talked about this one actually, but I think this is a very interesting statistic. So researchers have estimated that by the age of 10, kids with ADHD receive 20,000 more negative messages and critiques than their peers without ADHD. So that's over the course of 10 years, that's more than 5 negative comments per day more
Wow.
than their peers. And so, you know, bringing this back to the lens of like open-mindedness or closed-mindedness, you know, what are some thoughts, you know, Brooke, I'd be interested to hear, like the topic came up of masking. So you mentioned masking and like at work, you know, do you say, yes, I have ADHD and like get, you know, are you going to get additional support, or like what's the sort of cost benefit there? What has been your experience with respect to sort of butting your head up against that open-mindedness or closed-mindedness?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think that there's a right way for everybody. I think, you know, when you're talking about negative feedback, obviously that comes from some amount of closed-mindedness, and with ADHDers, it's usually misunderstanding the intent behind the behavior. So an ADHDer will behave in a certain way, and the assumption is made that they're doing it because they are lazy or they're not paying attention or they're rude or something like that. And
we don't like
so,
that.
Yeah.
you know, so what happens is a little kid is doing what their nervous system is telling them to do. They're reacting in a way that is authentic to them, and other people tell them that what they mean in that behavior is bad, when really they're just trying to be themselves. And so over time they learn to pretend to be like other people for the sake of, you know, social safety, and not getting picked on in school and not getting sent to detention and not, you know, whatever it is. You know, I couldn't sit still in school. I would like get up and wander around out of my seat. And, you know, I you know, eventually you learn to just stop. And then my body started to feel more and more rigid and tight. And then, you know, I started having emotional outbursts and all this stuff because you just, you know, I wasn't allowed to just like be my full weird self.
Right.
And so that's where masking comes in. Now, in my personal life, I'm very open. I mean, I'm a professional ADHDer, right? Because like I'm a coach. I advertise my services as a coach. Everybody in my life knows that I have ADHD. I don't hide it at work. But I also work in a context where it's safe to be out. And I've been able to really leverage my strengths instead of having to work for my weaknesses. If I were in a big corporate culture where there's a strong sort of expectation of conformity and rule following.
How apropos.
Yeah.
That would be a different thing. I mean, I've worked in environments like that, and I've I can never, I end up quitting because it becomes so intolerable. I start having emotional breakdowns.
Right.
So, I can't stay in a job like that for more than a year and a half.
That's even a long time.
Yeah, micromanaging me or like, trying
yeah.
to control how I do my work, not the end result, but like the process by which I get there. People who are, watching how I spend my time. I can't tell you how I spend my time. I know that if you give me a deadline and a project, I will deliver it, but I don't know how I'm going to get there. And so, but if you want to watch how I spend my time at my desk, you're going to be confused. And if you're an anxious micromanager type, you're going to be distressed.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're going to think I'm goofing around. I'm not, but you're going to think that I am. So, it just depends on the culture that you're in. And different people have different aspirations. If you aspire to be successful in a career where the culture is pretty conformist, it's hard to come out and say, this is how my brain works. Right. Until you're at a level, high enough in the system and people are dependent enough on you that like, it's safe to do that. There's like a privilege in having a higher level position that I think you have to aspire to in order to get to that level of freedom.
And it's too bad that safety has to be bundled with, sort of proving your worth ahead of time. Because like, Brooke, I know you. I've never worked with you, but I know from talking to you and coaching you and being coached by you, you're super duper smart. I'm just going to say that. Like, you're really, really smart. And I can tell just from our conversations, your brain works in very interesting ways. So then you think about like through closed-mindedness, as a result of closed-mindedness, if somebody is thinking, what's Brooke doing, like getting up and running around when she should be, working on this agenda, and then they're losing out on potentially, like all the great gifts that you have to offer.
Right. This brings up a question for me too. When my youngest daughter was in school, is still in school, but grade school, elementary, she had a kid in class, so she is very organized. She needs deep focus in order to achieve her work. And so she likes to get into a zone. And there was a kid in the class that was constantly getting up from his desk and twirling around the classrooms and jumping over desks and hopping all over the place. And the teacher was always trying to reel him in. And when they did story time, he'd pop up and he'd get things and start playing with them and tossing them across the classroom. And, and he sat next to my daughter, and finally, she was like, I just can't do this. I can't do my job. I can't do my work. I can't do anything. So I talked to the principal and I was like, I don't know what's going on here. I'm not sure, but he's not doing anything. He's not hitting her or doing anything like that. But she says he's so disruptive during the class. What do we do? So then the principal was like, well, just put him in another class. He'll be, someone else's problem. I'm like, oh. Wow. Okay. But I mean, it never, so I'm wondering on the elementary level, are they watching out for this? Are there certain types that are looking for this? Because in my mind, ADHD did not come to mind. I mean, it actually occurred to me for a moment, but I didn't think to say anything to the principal or the teachers. And I don't know if they actually had something in place to, potential kids that might be experiencing these difficulties to have them tested, or at least tell the parents, or,
Correct.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so I'm wondering if he was kind of mismanaged in that situation. And I don't know what really happened to him. I just know that he through school, he was never placed in the same classroom with her again.
That's one of the things I was saying. Whereas, how long has this been around? Because at that time, when I was in school too, if a kid was acting like that, he was bad.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay? He was bad. He was unruly. Parents didn't take care of him. Oh, he needs... You're right.
It was all about the parents. Yeah, they were like, oh, those parents are doing their job.
They would go to a 600 school for behavior problems.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But he probably had...
He probably wasn't... Yeah.
This is what I'm saying.
He doesn't... Because he didn't hurt any kids. No. It's not like he was a real troubled child. He just couldn't
sit still.
Yeah.
So they said he's bad. And that's labeling. That's, again, labeling, which I didn't like.
Whereas, if you were to approach that same situation from a more open-minded perspective, where you could say, all right, kids, this is like a teachable moment. There are some kids who, you tell them, please sit down and, there are some kids who literally can't. So what do? Do you punish them?
Right.
Do you just send them away? Or do you say, oh, okay, so for those kids, what accommodation can we make? And maybe they can have a special area of the
Exactly.
rug. And like, look, if you need to like run around or do some jumping jacks, like you go over there and like, that's just you're, you know, that's
Yeah,
how you
totally.
need to get it out.
When we're talking about public schools, so my mother and my sister are both public school teachers, and when you're talking about public schools and
Gotta give applause for that.
yes, and you know, IEPs and 504 plans and all of these things, all these interventions, it's extremely complicated.
This is
because,
additional
you know,
support for kids who need it. That's what
Okay.
for people who don't know. That's
but
what
in order
Oh,
to
yeah.
get access to these plans, you have to get a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And while a school can't generally offer a diagnosis, you know, a pediatrician can sort of, and there are specialists. A diagnosis is extremely expensive. It's often not covered by insurance. And the parents have to be on board for it. And
Right.
that is usually the biggest
That's the
hurdle. Is
problem.
the
They
parents
don't
are like,
wanna-
there's nothing
Yep.
wrong with my kid.
Yep.
Oh yeah, that's
So
the
we don't want
first
to get
one.
them
It's like all these
evaluated.
barriers.
So like,
Yeah.
as a child of educators, and there are lots of educators in my family, I'm of the opinion that every kid should be evaluated across the board,
Interesting.
so that everybody gets access to information about how their brains work. Because even kids that align more with a neuronormative expectation, they're still going to have strengths and weaknesses. They're still going to have aptitudes and interests. It's better to know that, because then you're empowered with that information.
Yeah.
And then, you know, classroom management is a whole other thing, which
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
not a
that's a
teacher,
whole
so
different
I
thing.
can't
Oh, please.
advise on that.
But you know, I'll say
I won't even try.
yeah, right. Our pediatrician, now that you mention that, and I didn't even think of it, but once my youngest reached a certain age, they did conduct some minor testing in the annual checkup, which is very thorough. And she said she did several different things with my daughter, and said, well, according to what I've seen today, I don't think she's a candidate to need to be diagnosed for ADHD. She doesn't follow these particular things that I was talking about, or whatever it was that she did. She did it, and I didn't even notice she was doing it. So whatever she was doing, I was in the room, but I had no idea what she did. So
Yeah.
I was like, oh, interesting. Okay. So she's like, well, you should just know. And I'm like, well, it didn't even occur to me. And now here we are talking about this, which is, it's just doesn't occur. Like, I mean, I know it's there,
Yeah.
but I know she just wasn't a candidate to be further looked at for diagnosis.
Right.
But I think maybe all pediatricians should be doing that. I mean,
It makes sense now, and you think about it. I
if
mean,
the schools can't, then maybe the pediatricians can. Like,
yeah.
like you say, the parents ain't gonna. 'Cause I would just bring up one other incident. Now that you said that, I was doing a kindergarten. Matter of fact, it was pre-K, and there was one kid. Matter of fact, there was two, and I would be in the back. You know, always help them a little bit more what they were doing. And every time there was a question, he would jump up out of his seat. I know the. And all the kids would be like, oh my God, oh my God. So I'd go over to him and I'd say, hey, she's gonna call on you. Just wait. You know. Then I'd go back and he's asking. And then by the third time, all the kids was just like, you know,
over it.
oh my God, he needs to be quiet. So Miss Dawn. So I'd go get him, I'd bring it in the back, and I'd talk to him. And then one day, I wasn't there, and he went ballistic.
Uh-oh.
And the minute I came into the school, the kids was like, Miss Dawn, oh my God, you should have saw him. He's a pre-K. He was out of control, Miss Dawn. I was like, oh my God. So I talked to him back, went fine. The graduation, the parents came to me and they said, what do you do with my son? Because it was both of them. They had one in pre-K and one in kindergarten. I talked to both of them. She says, what do you do? I said, nothing. I just sat him down. You know, and then the teacher said, really, what did you say to him? I said, if you raise your hand one more damn time, when I tell you not to, you're going to come back here and talk to me, okay?
No, but I mean,
You're gonna get the hand.
You're joking about it, but it sounds like you were actually talking to him.
I was talking to him, exactly.
Not at him and not belittling him.
Exactly.
Not just,
And he listened to
don't
me.
do that. That's
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
Yes, I said, wait your turn.
Just wait. Yeah. There's definitely an art on how to communicate with people.
Yeah, it's not labeling
like
him
you made
because he
them
was
feel
getting ready to be
seen.
labeled.
Yeah.
Being seen is really hard for kids who have weird brains. And I was going to add another kind of neurodivergence that exists, which is giftedness, which exists in different capacities. Kids who are gifted, their brains work really completely differently. And and often, like with all these, it's a spiky profile, we call it. Like, you're hyper developed in certain areas and then not in others. So like really gifted kids are often really brilliant in some capacity, brilliant with language, brilliant with math, whatever, but maybe their emotional development is slower. And so they show up in this, phenomenal way in certain capacities, and then in other ways they're extremely limited. And so that's, it affects how they show up and how they develop relationships. It can be extremely, I think, we talk about kids, but like the long-term impact on interpersonal relationships for this stuff, especially when you layer on the trauma of being misunderstood and told that your intentions are bad, and, having your very core essence of humanity being questioned by everybody around you all the time, is extremely damaging. So there's a lot of trauma in the neurodivergent population.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like CPTSD, as they say. And interestingly, CPTSD traits are similar to ADHD traits. So often there's a lot of like untangling that needs to be done in order to figure out what is trauma versus what is ADHD.
What about the chaos of a mess, like a messy room? If they just live in the
live in the funk.
Yeah, in the funk. Not in the funk. It's not smelly, but it's just
But it's
damn messy.
Yeah.
Well, and
It's
that
like-
really affects different people in
It
different
does,
ways.
right?
There are some
Yeah.
people who can thrive in a mess, and there are I have to have
Can't have
nothing on my desk.
Right. It's got to be pristine for me too. I can't
clean.
like pristine. Just needs to be very organized.
Clean.
Fresh as summer's eve.
Oh, that's a different show.
Hit the button for that
Wow,
one.
that's a throwback.
Oh, I'm surprised, Adam. That was slow. You know what Summer's Eve is, Adam? You know what Summer's Eve is?
I
does
do.
not.
Yeah, it makes me feel fresh all day.
I bet it does.
Well, that's a little bit off topic, but Brooke,
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I have a comment.
yeah, please bring it, Dawn.
Blanking out and ADHD on Psycho Central was posted in 2017. And as a matter of fact, I read this article too, so I'm going to read this.
All right, please.
There is a stereotype that the reason people with ADHD have trouble sustaining attention is because they just have so many thoughts. They get distracted by their overly dynamic brains. I do find this stereotype flattering, as in, I have so many cool ideas, I simply can't stay focused on one of them for very long. Those of us with ADHD don't just have a problem with getting distracted by our thoughts, we also have a problem with getting distracted by our lack of thoughts. I'm talking about mind blank phenomenal. And I tell you, this is, I'll be honest with you, a phenomenal topic. Because I was like, what? What the hell does this mean? And it's just reading and not being closed-minded. Okay.
Well,
Did
so
I-
I'm curious, Brooke, from your
Excellent.
experience, have you experienced that? How did they refer to it in this? Mind
Mind blank
blankness?
phenomena.
blankness?
So when I hear that, what I think is that, ADHDers are not good at filtering sensory inputs. So when my mind goes blank, it's usually because I've taken in way too much information for me to process. So it's sort of like it gets clogged.
Yeah.
And I have to slow down and stop taking in more information.
You have to become a
until I can,
potato.
like,
You gotta rotor your brain.
Yeah, it has to I've spent a lot of time recently really thinking about my personal tempo. So when I get like that, it's because I'm trying to go too fast. And so I'm like, okay, I need to slow way down. So because my brain moves so much faster than my nervous system can actually process. And so like my brain is hungry and it wants more information. And I want to consume everything, but my body can't actually digest all of that. And so it's a real process of being like, I'm going to slow. And, I'm a musician, so tempo is like, slow down.
Yeah.
And that helps with the mind blankness because slowly things can sort of disentangle and become unclogged.
That's a good learning process.
That is
That's
good.
It's
fascinating.
almost like meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bring
I
you
mean, yes, going to that blankness
Yep.
and having a clear and free mind. It took
Absolutely.
me forever, like years. Practice. I used to have a pristine setting. I had to have everything quiet. A candle had to be lit. It had to be dark.
Yes, sir.
And so I could actually achieve the meditation I was wanting to. And then over time, finally, I was like, lose the candle. I don't need the damn dark room. And I'm lucky if I can find a minute just to make sure that meditation happens. And I can do it. I could be in the middle of India and it's still going to happen. Like stampedes and crowds and hordes. And
I was going to say, I think being in the middle of India would be conducive to meditation.
Well, you'd think, but it's rather busy. Rather busy. But you know what? They can sit in the middle of the road and do that too.
That's true.
You know?
They can cross their legs.
They can.
Do that.
That's a different show.
It's a whole different show. We can't cross our... Can you sit... Oh, it used to be called Indian style, but now they call it crisscross applesauce.
Crisscross applesauce. That's right.
Okay.
Right. Brooke, when you mentioned the tempo idea, which I think is so interesting, especially from you being a musician, what tempo in particular, in terms of, you know, an Italian word, would you say? Is it like a largo? Is it a, you know, lentissimo?
Lentissimo.
Well, it depends. I would, largo. But it's more a felt sense than it is an actual like marking. You know, it's very much it's the sense of like I can't move faster than my body wants to move right now, and so it's I used to live so much in my head, in part because my head felt safer than my body did, because my body's where all my emotions live, right? And emotions are scary, but I've started to just be like, my body dictates the tempo at which I move. My brain is always very hungry, and I know that my brain is very hungry, and so I try to feed it, but I try to never let my tempo, my internal sense of tempo, move faster than it wants to go. So no matter how much information I'm taking in, I don't expect myself to digest it faster than I can.
Wow. That's really poetic.
Recognize. Yes, it is.
And I love that idea of the dichotomy between the hungry brain taking in things and then the emotions kind of living in the body and kind of listening to that for the tempo. And that, you know, it's interesting, Brooke, that kind of brings me back a little bit to where you started this conversation, which was applying open-mindedness to yourself and your own self-inquiry, and kind of realizing that, oh yeah, you know, I got to listen to my body for this tempo. Yeah, that's fascinating.
It is.
Well, we could talk to you all day, Brooke.
I know, really.
Interesting.
But you've shed so much perspective on this. It's really
shed a lot of light for me
personally. Definitely.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure.
We learned a lot today.
Absolutely. You had Adam in his element, honey.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Brooke.
So speaking of which,
oh my goodness.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
He said
This man. Element. I just say element doo-doo.
That was Adam because he drank the detox tea.
The detox. Well, I finished it, so it's kicking in.
The show is over. Adam gotta go.
But he's wearing an adult diaper. Don't forget.
Exactly. Wow, things are breaking down.
Yes, they are.
Yes, they are. Come on.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thanks so much for joining us today. We really
Thank you.
enjoyed
It was
having
such a
you.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Blessings.
having me.
So much fun.
Absolutely. Wow. I love this.
That was great.
This was educational for me personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
I love that. I
was.
could see and feel your mind expanding.
absolutely.
Literally.
Absolutely.
What a great thing.
Yeah. Because I was like, wow.
I mean, it's amazing there's any room for our minds to grow with Adam in here.
I know.
You know, there's a character called Big Head on Silicon Valley.
Oh, Big Eddie.
We're gonna we'll call Adam Big Head. Big
No.
Stormbringer.
Joker.
Strombringer.
Extra combo.
I want to do the Joker thing.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know when that episode.
Well, I'll do the eyebrows. I'm doing the eyebrows right now, but for people.
Oh my God, that's so funny. We need to flash that picture. We need to get that picture and flash it up.
We keep saying that. You got to get it.
I know.
You got to.
I mean, I have it.
Yeah.
I want to see it. All right.
You didn't see the Joker picture yet?
I did, but
You
I want
did.
other people.
You want
to
everyone to
it.
see it.
Yes,
All right.
absolutely. And I just have to say one more thing about the shirts. They didn't get.
Oh
me
yeah.
one.
No! You had to go
You see
in
my-
order to get
didn't
one.
get me.
Oh man. I'll ask Dana to bring one tomorrow
Yeah.
to EB Day. She'll be there. Hey,
No, this
if you go to EB Day, you might get one.
Okay, tomorrow.
We'll get it. Well, all three of us will wear them.
We'll all bump the Farm Fest shirt.
Deuces.
Yeah.
We got to go.
We gotta go.
Yes.